You have been an anti-Brexit campaigner, haven't you? Is that what this is really about?
I was a Remainer who was anti-Brexit, but look, Brexit has happened. We lost that argument. BBC Farming Today interviewed me and some other farmers at our Westminster rally on Monday. By putting this question to me about my anti-Brexit stance, it seems the BBC are suggesting that only a Brexiteer could campaign or should campaign against what is happening to farming, because much of what is happening to farming is being caused by Brexit.
On that protest in London earlier this week had three demands. First, a ban on what they see as dishonest labelling, where food imported and processed in Britain can be labelled as British. Second, they want the UK to withdraw from the Australian and New Zealand trade deals. And third, they want a clear plan for food security, along with specific help for food production. Well, Liz Webster from Save British Farming organised the event and told Anna Hill this situation has been brewing for a while.
It's years of farmers being trodden down by a top-heavy supermarket system without adequate support at policy level.
Well, let's look at labelling. The government has launched a consultation just recently on better labelling, including country of origin and method of production. So doesn't that answer one of your demands?
Well, it's talking about one of our demands. It's not answering it because, there's a lot of talk that happens and there's no real action.
You're also talking about food security, a food plan for food security. Now, the government has just announced that new applicants to the Sustainable Farming Incentive will only be able to put 25% of their land out of food production. Is that something that you would have wanted to see?
No, what we need is support to produce food. Our inputs, as I'm sure you know, have been, sometimes up as 50% inflation. And farmers just can't afford to produce food. There's too much risk, which is why so many of them have been signing up for SFI of late. The problem we've got at the moment is so many growers are being undercut with their contracts. They're just left high and dry. They've got all of the expenses of producing the food, and there's no guarantee that they're going to even break even. Now, most farmers, a lot of farmers, are losing money producing food.
It's not really up to the government, is it, to actually dictate the contracts that supermarkets have with farmers?
Well, in France they do, and we did used to have a resale maintenance price act, and we definitely could consider something like that, and that would protect food security. And I think it's what we need to do, because once somebody gives up production of eggs, pigs, vegetables, cucumbers, whatever, they're not going to come back to it easily. Once you've collapsed, you collapse. So we need a proper grown-up food plan. And this government produced an Agriculture Act which hardly mentions food and food production. And that is where the problem lies.
Some farmers claim that this event is being, as they termed it, hijacked by people with political agendas that they don't agree with. You have been an anti-Brexit campaigner, haven't you? Is that what this is really about?
I was a Remainer who was anti-Brexit, but look, Brexit has happened. We lost that argument. There's many farmers here today who voted Brexit. We've sat round the table and we all agree with where we are and what needs to be done.
Now, Liz.
There is altogether too much focus on what people voted 8 years ago. It struck me when I was at the demo on Monday that many of the people there driving tractors were young. They weren't even old enough to vote in 2016. And it really is time to move on. 8 years is a long time, and Brexit is doing so much damage to this country. But also, so many Remainers say nasty things about farmers, they voted for it and all of this stuff. But ultimately, this is about everyone's food and it's about everyone's public health. And right now, we have got a whole load of illegal, dangerous food flooding in here. And as a result, food poisoning is soaring here. And this is what we're trying to fight against, because the only way we can stop this is by aligning with European regulations and working hard to get back within the protections of the single market.
Earlier this week, English farmers drove tractors into London and held a rally outside Parliament, protesting at what they say is a lack of support for British food production. Well, this follows similar action taken by farmers across Europe and in Wales, and as we've reported over the past few months, the reasons behind all those protests have varied. Well, our reporter Melanie Abbott met some of the farmers this week as they gathered before that rally.
I think it's fair to say you've probably never seen this many tractors in central London. There are probably 70 here now at New Covent Garden Market. They're gathering here before they head down to Westminster to circle Parliament Square a few times to bring home their message. They're bearing placards saying back British farming, stop substandard imports, no farmers, no food, no future. So let's have a chat to just some of them and see why they're here today.
We're obviously not at all happy the way the British agriculture has been treated by government, whether it be imports or what we produce in this country. We're not paid fairly, we're not looked after fairly. And it's becoming very worrying that our businesses are becoming more substandard. We're not earning enough money to pay our way, all our input costs are going up, and the produce we produce, we're not paid well enough for.
Now, your sign says don't let British farming drift away. What do you mean by that?
25% of British farmers are currently living below the poverty line, and there's only so long you can stay like that, isn't there? And when we've got a statistic come out recently that 49% of British fruit and veg farmers think they're going to be out of business in the next 12 months, it's already drifting away, and we've got to grab it and stop it from happening anymore.
I think that we need to wake up our politicians and maybe even alert the public to the fact that food security, although it's talked a lot about, most of the policies are actually actively encouraging farmers away from producing food.
Well, just a few hours before that rally, the government announced a change in the rules for environmental schemes. Farmers in England will now only be able to put 25% of their land into schemes which take land out of food production to try to address those concerns about food security. Under the SFI, the Sustainable Farm Incentive, which is replacing the old EU subsidies in England, farmers are paid for environmental work, like improving soil or growing seed for wild birds. Many can be done alongside growing food. Well, now farmers will be limited on how much land they can put into the 6 options, which DEFRA says take land away from growing food. The new cap comes after some raised concerns around food security. Winter flooding and the high cost of fertiliser has made growing food more expensive. And after the government increased payments for environmental schemes back in January, more farmers are signing up. Well, speaking to the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee on Tuesday, the DEFRA Secretary, Steve Barclay, said the changes would shift the balance towards food production.
There was a risk only of a very small percentage, but nonetheless a wider concern that some farms might be put entirely into environmental schemes as opposed to food production. So we put a 25% limit on that where there is that risk. Not least because it's not often good for the environment to put 100% of land into some of those schemes. So it wasn't good environmentally, but it certainly wasn't good for food production and food security. And more widely, my focus very much is on prioritising food production and food security. So that's the wider direction of travel since being appointed.
The Secretary of State for the Environment, Steve Barclay there.
Subscribe if you haven't already, and also don't forget to comment, let me know what you think.